Let's dive into a unique topic. It's not unique at all, but let's talk about public schools. What do you think about public schools? You think they're doing a good job of teaching our children to be free thinkers, to be creators, to be leaders? Well, let me tell you a story. When I went to school, I went to public school, like so many of you, because that's just what we did. We got on the bus, we went to school, we did as we were told. If we didn't, we were scolded, we went to detention, we got suspended. I did all of them. But the one thing I also did is followed the script. I went through school and learned the things they wanted me to learn. And when I wasn't learning what was their prerogative, when I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do, I failed. And as a young boy, I failed first grade. Thinking back to that time, I was devastated. I was devastated that I had to repeat the first grade. But you know what? It was probably one of the better things that could have happened to me. But that's not the point of this story. The point of this story is what I remember about school. All the way up to high school is I followed the curriculum. I knew there was a lot of things I wasn't good at and I failed those classes or I got terrible grades in those. But then there were things that I excelled at. But you see, what the school did not do is see what I was excelling at and push me deeper into that. Help me, guide me, as guidance counselors are supposed to, into a path that I would excel at. Instead, for most of my middle school time and even my early high school time, I was pushed into things that I hated. I was taught to take classes for things I wasn't good at. And because of that, I suffered as a boy. I suffered as a student, I suffered as a child, and I didn't put my full energy into it because I just didn't like it. And as I got into high school, some things changed. They changed for the better. You see, I found a path that I loved. And that path happened when I was 16 years old, actually 15 to be specific. And that path was when I decided I didn't want to work for somebody ever again. You see, I had a really bad job when I was 16 years old, and that job degraded me so badly that when I quit, the day I quit, I said, I'm never working for somebody ever again. My creative mind kicked in, and I was a very creative kid, and I went home and I told Mom, I said, Mom, I quit my job, thinking she was gonna be upset, so I had a plan B. I said, but I'm gonna create my own clothing line. It's gonna be called Fat Clothing Company. I'm gonna print t-shirts with my art teacher, a creative mind, somebody that believed in me. And I always relate to Mr. Mahalski, my art teacher, and I think about his impact he had on my life the same way the janitor impacted Rudy in the movie Rudy. Mr. Mahalski took me in. We printed those t-shirts after school and I sold them during school. I sold them out of my backpack. 1 dozen shirts, 2 dozen shirts, then 2 dozen shirts and a dozen hats, and I continued on. I was becoming an entrepreneur, but first and foremost, I was going off the beaten path. I was creating my own destiny for something I excelled at, something I really liked. And school, the public schooling system, fought me. I remember when I went into college, community college that is, they made me take all these pre-elective courses that I had to take. I wanted to go to college to learn accounting, to learn business math, to learn economics. Instead, I had to take bowling. I had to take all these classes which had nothing to do with what I excelled at. The moral of the story is, does the public schooling system create free thinkers, creators, and leaders? The answer is probably not. And the answer can be seen in how the public schooling system was created. And also, we're going to cover that in this video, but the one thing I want to talk about is the rise to homeschooling. And then I want to tell you a story about my daughter and what we're doing to excel her learning, but excel her learning so that she is a leader, a free thinker, and a creator. Here are the stats. There were about 3.1 million homeschool students in 2021 and 22 in grades K through 12 in the United States. That's roughly 6% of all school-aged children. Now, if we go back to any time before 2019, that number was 2.5 million. Now, I know the pandemic had a lot to do with this, but here's the thing. The homeschool population has been growing at an estimated 2 to 8% year over year. And that's not going to slow down. People are waking up. People are waking up to what their children are being fed. I don't mean food. being fed, their minds are being fed at school. They are being fed a pre-done, boxed lunch of education. Here's my problem with that. Kids excel at different things. And how I've known this and how I've learned this is I've watched how my daughter has excelled, and my daughter is in Montessori school. Now, if you don't know what Montessori is a schooling that doesn't teach kids a fixed set curriculum. Montessori is where children have the ability to pick and choose what they do within a frame of reference, and then whatever they excel at, the teachers push them to go into that deeper and deeper. And when they find that they don't excel at something, the children go out and they find something else. And all the teachers are doing is taking notes at what that student is excelling at, what they're really thinking about. In short form, Montessori school pushes into what the child is excelling at, not what the state or some regulatory board says our children should and must learn. As Vivi gets older, we will continue to keep Vivi in private schools. We will continue to monitor how she is being taught information. Now, I am not a teacher. Now, when it comes down to teaching, I stay in my lane, which is money. So I teach Vivi all about how to be her own bank and all about how money works. And I do that with very unique skill sets. And I do that in a gamification kind of way where we do it with her little piggy bank and her banking system. And we use her little characters from Paw Patrol as the people that she lends money to and the people that buy things from her. It's awesome. But Montessori school does the same, and I will continue to push Vivi into the areas that she excels at, and I will have her pay no attention to the things she does not excel at, unless they are mandatory things like reading, writing, and arithmetics. But what is it that we have all been fed from the education system? Well, I guess we can trace that all the way back to the Rockefellers. Because if you really want to know where this all comes from, it comes from breaking down the Rockefeller education. So this article right here is a pretty interesting one, and it shows how the Rockefellers donated $100 million, which would be the equivalent of $3 billion today, to the General Education Board. Now, the task of this board was this: to organize children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things that their fathers and mothers were doing in an imperfect way. So think about that. Essentially, the General Education Board, as it was created back then, was to teach you to do exactly what your parents did. So if your parents worked in the mines, you were to do the same thing, but in a more perfect way. If your parents worked in a factory, you were taught to work in a factory. How much does this resonate in today's world? Because I know it resonated with me. When I was growing up and I wanted to go out and create my company, I went to my father because I needed money, I needed help. And my dad, who worked at a factory, said to me, "Chris, that is not a very good idea. You're gonna lose all that money. How about this? Come down to the factory, I'll get you an interview and you can work the 30 years that he didn't say this exactly, but the 30 years that I did, retire with a measly little pension and live happily ever after." But that's what the education teaches us, to do in a perfect way what our parents did in an imperfect way. In other words, create a whole bunch of robots to continue to work for the man. I'm sorry, but that isn't what our children need. I like what Albert Einstein said: "The only thing that prevents me from learning is my education." That's what Albert Einstein said. And I'll go one step further. Earl Nightingale, in his Strangest Secret in the World address, he talked about the difference between success and failure. And he said, the difference between success and failure is simply creation. Because those that succeed have created success. And those that have failed have conformed to somebody else's failed reality. Now shall I go back? The task to organize children and teach them in a perfect way to do the things that their fathers and mothers were doing in an imperfect way. Doesn't that equal conform? It sure does. Well, I hate to say it this way, but I would love for you to conform and do what so many others have done, and that is subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's the only time I'll ask you to conform, but if you subscribe to this YouTube channel, the next thing is I will enable you to create your perfect financial future. So click that little bell right above, and that bell will give you notifications every single time we go live. Let's get back into the public education system. I've got a lot of other stuff here, and these are some of the perks of homeschooling. Now, homeschooling's on the rise, but check this article out. These are the facts on homeschooling. But let me follow up and give you a quote from John D. Rockefeller. I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And I preface the Rockefellers' General Education Board's task to organize children and teach them to do in a perfect way what their parents were doing in an imperfect way. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. If you want to be a worker, and you want your kids to be workers, if you want your kids to do what you did in a more perfect way, send them to public school. If you want your kids to be free thinkers, if you want your kids to be leaders, if you want your kids to be creators, I'm not saying the public schooling system can't work, but you may want to consider alternative methods and just talk with your children. Talk to them about creation. Talk to them about pushing in to the things that they excel at. And the things that they don't excel at, get them out of the way. Because there's no better way to ruin a child's morale. There's no better way to ruin a child's forward progress than to have them focusing on something that they don't like, something that they don't relate to, and something they are just not good at. We are all put on this earth for a specific reason, and we will find that path. We will see that path be formed for us. But if we don't walk the path because other people say, no, you must conform to the public school's square box of education. You must learn how to do this. You must learn how to do that. That over there, that's a silly idea. Don't buy into the lie. Now let me stop real quick and give my gratitude for all those teachers out there like Mr. Mahalski and all the teachers like Mr. Crawley and so many other teachers I had that went off the beaten path. They saw what I was excelling at and they stayed after class. They stayed in school when they should be going home to their families to help me with my business. You see, I was 16 when I started my first company, which means I was in high school and I didn't learn the things I needed to run a business in high school. So therefore those teachers, Mr. Mahalski, Mr. Crawley, I can't remember all the rest of them, and so many others, they stayed after on their own time to help me learn the real things that allowed me to progress. And as I went into college, although I had to take all those things like bowling, now I'm not a bad bowler today, and that's probably because of that NCCC curriculum, but I also had professors in college that stayed after and turned me on to the Small Business Development Center and taught me how to write business plans and do financial projections and pro formas and all the things that shaped me to be the man I am today. So I commend all of you teachers and professors that go off the beaten path and help the children excel in the areas that they need to excel in. It's not about what happens in the classroom, folks. It's about what happens outside the classroom that matters. And that is what children like me remember most. I think all of you can relate to that. All of you have those teachers that have helped you. All of you have those teachers that have taken an interest in what it is you excel at, and they have stayed after. Think about them. Because as you get older in life, as you go through life, you will never forget those that helped you. So I found this unique article, and it's a really good one if you're thinking about homeschooling your children. And listen, I'm gonna talk about some of the problems with homeschooling in just a second, like it costs money. But let's just talk about some of the reasons and motivations for homeschooling and home education. So right here it goes in and it talks about the most common reasons homeschooling is on the rise. It gives the parents the ability to customize and individualize the curriculum and the learning environment for each child, just like Montessori school, where you can push the child to the things that they excel at. It accomplishes more academically than in schools. It certainly enhances family relationships between the child and the parents, and also the siblings. It provides a guided and reasoned social interaction with youthful peers and adults. It provides a safer environment for children and the youth, because there's a lot of physical violence, drugs, alcohol, psychological abuse, racism, and improper and unhealthy sexuality associated with institutional schools. That's a big one for me. To me, there are men and there are women. Any questions? I know some of you won't agree with that. As an alternative education approach, when public or private institutional schools are closed due to acute health situations such as related diseases, COVID, coronavirus, everything got shut down. Homeschooling continues. They protect minority children from racism in public schools or lower expectations of children of color. Totally agree with that. Teach and impart a particular set of values, beliefs, and worldwide views for your children and the youth. Now, you may not agree with all of those, and I probably don't either, but the one thing that comes down to all of those is you control the outcome. You and your child control the outcome. In public schools, I will tell you this. When I was in public school, I was bullied. I witnessed knife fights. I didn't have any gun situations, but drugs were all around me. Alcohol was all around me, and I'm sure there was a lot more. In today's school, I've seen how this works through cousins, and also we have an exchange student. Just recently, there was a scare in the school because somebody did a letter saying they were going to shoot up the school. Now, I know we live in different times, but you know what? You can control where your children get their knowledge from. And I sincerely think most parents, not all, but most parents can do a better job than the public school. Or maybe a hybrid model where there's some public school and some homeschooling. But here's some of the issues. And these issues with homeschooling are, number one, time and money. Most parents in today's world have to work. Both the father and the mother, they have to work to support a family, especially with where inflation is. So what is the solution to this? Well, there is no immediate solution. It is a slow building, slow developing solution. And it requires us all to come together and realize the problems with public schooling and try to make a difference. I'm doing what I can by donating money from our foundation to private schools to help them push this forward, to help them expand the Montessori vision of how that education works into the higher grades. But the other thing, regardless of the situation, we have to express an importance on what we want our children to learn and what we want our children to become. If we want our children to just become a more perfect us, great. Public school is going to teach them to do exactly that. The other thing that you can do is the higher education, like colleges. Different colleges definitely promote free thinking, creativity, and leadership skills. Some of those colleges, yes, are Ivy League, so find a way to make it happen. Save for your children. Start early when your child is born, just like I did with Vivi at 6 months old. Start their banking system. Start putting away so that your children can have the proper education instead of waiting till it's too late and then saying, well, I'm already paying property taxes so my kids can go to public school, so I guess that's where they're going to go. You are responsible for what your children are going to learn, and you are responsible for providing the funding for that. In the future, I hope that some of the property tax money that we spend, especially here in New York, goes to be able to be chosen by the parent how that money is spent. But we're not there yet. Wouldn't that be awesome? We pay our property taxes and we get to choose how our children are educated. Now, that would be a perfect future, but we got a lot of hurdles to get over before we get to that point. And one of the hurdles is how we prepare our children for the future. That's, I think, where it starts. And that's also where it ends. Hey folks, if any of you liked this video, or didn't like it even for that matter, check this video out here. It's called Vivi Lucky Jeans. This is the private banking system I set up for my daughter when she was 6 months old. And not only that, if you are interested in setting up a private banking system for your little one, book a call with one of our money mentors by clicking the link in the description. We'll see you next time.